On a quiet September morning, you feel the Earth breathe in its sleep. Somewhere beneath the Pacific, pressure that has been building for centuries decides to exhale. It starts as a tremor beneath the seafloor off the Kamchatka Peninsula, one of those places that seems to exist purely for geologists and myths. And within moments, it grows into a magnitude 7.8 convulsion. Fishermen near Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky watch the horizon twist, birds scatter, and the water pull away before rushing back like liquid stone. At the same time, satellites high above register something else entirely, the sun's magnetic field blooming open like a wound of light. Two events, 72 hours apart, one planetary, one stellar. You might call it coincidence, but coincidences, as we'll learn tonight, have a rhythm. You close your eyes, listening. The sound is not a roar, but a deep band hum, the frequency of continents remembering they are still floating. News anchors call it another quake in a long year of shaking, another reminder that Earth is restless. Yet 3 days earlier, on September 15th, the magnetosphere had been struck by a G3 geomagnetic storm, a slow, invisible tide of charged particles, brushing the planet's protective bubble. For 2 nights, auroras danced as far south as Colorado, painting power lines green. The same scientists who chart those shimmering curtains also note a rise in seismic chatter across the ring of fire. Correlation is not causation, they insist. Still, the timing feels rehearsed, as if Earth and Sun were following an old duet score written in plasma and stone. The Sun, after 11 years of relative calm, is awakening. Solar cycle 25 has reached its crescendo. Coronal holes gape like dark petals across the photosphere, spewing high-speed solar wind toward every orbiting body in reach. To an astronomer, it's beauty. To an engineer, it's hazard. Radio blackouts, GPS errors, satellites jittering under electromagnetic pressure. Yet to you, lying under this wide night sky, it's something else entirely. A feeling that the universe has leaned a little closer, whispering in frequencies our bones can feel. Enter the third voice in this cosmic trio. 3i Atlas, the interstellar wanderer, designated C, divided by 2025 N1. Discovered by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, its name is an accidental poem 3i for its status as the third interstellar object ever observed. Atlas for the mythic Titan who holds up the heavens. Right now it's hurtling inward toward perihelion, dragging behind it a coma of dust and plasma so vast it could swallow half the Sunday. Through telescopes it appears faint, ghostly, but its physics are anything but gentle. An object only a few kilometers wide, creating a gaseous sphere, hundreds of thousands of kilometers across, a living demonstration of how the smallest travelers can cast the largest shadows. Scientists assure us there is no danger. At closest approach, 3i Atlas will remain over 1.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly 168 million kilometers. Safe, distant, academic, and yet, the numbers don't quite soothe the collective imagination, because when an interstellar comet and an awakening sun arrive in the same season that the planet itself begins to tremble, the mind starts to weave stories that the data alone cannot silence. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's monitors trace the storm's signature: solar wind velocities surpassing 6 to 100 kilometers per second, plasma densities thinning to near vacuum. The KP index climbs past 6, strong enough to make compass needles twitch and electric grids groan. Far below, the United States Geological Survey logs quake after quake, each precisely time-stamped, each perfectly indifferent. Two data sets that should never intersect begin to rhyme. Aurora forecasts and aftershock maps, magnetometer graphs, and fault line plots, all pulsing like two heartbeats, learning to share the same rhythm. You stare at the overlapping curves and feel the tug of myth hiding in the margins. There's an ancient comfort in giving the sun intentions. Every civilization did it. The Egyptians saw Ra steering his bark through the underworld. The Maya recorded solar cycles as divine moods. Even modern scientists talk about our star waking up as though it ever slept. Perhaps anthropomorphism is our way of staying sane in a universe that keeps rearranging itself without asking permission. Still, sometimes the language of myth gets too close to the mathematics of coincidence, and we find ourselves whispering questions we shouldn't. Could solar storms nudge tectonic plates? Could electromagnetic surges prime a fault already trembling on the edge? The official answer remains no, but curiosity, that quiet rebellion of the human mind, refuses to file the question away. Imagine the heliosphere, the vast bubble carved out by the sun's magnetic field, as a single, breathing organism. Every planet, every comet, every dust grain inside it participates in a grand electrical circuit, billions of kilometers wide. When something alien enters that system, an object from another star with its own charge, its own magnetic tail, the currents shift ever so slightly. We have equations for this, models, plasma simulations. But equations don't capture the poetry of it. The way cosmic fields ripple like silk in slow motion. The way an interstellar visitor becomes a note in the sun's magnetic symphony. Down here, you might not notice any of it. You make coffee, scroll headlines, glance at a graph of rising earthquake frequencies, and move on. But the ground under your feet is listening. Seismic sensors hum with new data. Deep ocean buoys relay subtle changes in pressure. Somewhere, an algorithm meant to filter noise starts flagging patterns no one can yet explain. And in that unseen world of magnetometers and tremor plots, a strange correlation begins to glow faintly like phosphorescence along the tide line before dawn. That's where our story begins, not with panic, but with wonder. You're not here to be frightened. You're here to drift through the quiet architecture of impossible coincidences. So take a breath. Let the world outside fade, until all that remains is this slow, unfolding mystery. The sun, stretching after its long nap, the earth shivering in reply, and a ghost from another star approaching the stage. The universe is clearing its throat, and somewhere between magnetic field lines and tectonic plates, something is about to speak. The first sign that something deeper is stirring comes not from the sky, but from beneath the sea. Instruments anchored along the Pacific Rim record a strange whisper in the data. Tremor clusters, synchronized across thousands of kilometers, as if the planet were clearing its throat. Scientists call it harmonic tremor, a sustained vibration produced when magma moves through narrow channels. But this time, the signals come from regions with no volcanic activity. Fault zones that should be asleep begin humming in frequencies too low for human ears. It's easy to dismiss as coincidence, until the timing overlaps perfectly with fluctuations in the solar wind. Somewhere between science and superstition, a new curiosity is born. The sun has moods, and lately they've been dramatic. Coronal holes blossom like dark eyes across its glowing face. Vast magnetic gateways where charged particles pour outward into space. These streams travel for days before reaching Earth, and when they arrive, They don't knock politely. They squeeze the magnetosphere, stir up auroras, and, according to some researchers, ripple the ionosphere in ways that could subtly affect conditions below. The idea that space weather might influence seismic weather has existed on the fringes for decades, always dismissed, never disproved. Tonight, it finds new life. You picture the planet's magnetic field as a shimmering bubble, its edges flickering where solar particles collide. For most of history, we never knew this invisible boundary existed. It was only in the 20th century, when satellites began to feel the tug of solar storms, that humanity realized Earth lives inside a force field. And like any living shell, it flexes. When it flexes too much, currents flow through the crust, currents strong enough to light up telegraph wires in the 1800s, to melt transformers in Quebec in 1989, to confuse compasses on ships crossing the Arctic. The same currents, following the lines of least resistance, may also snake along fault zones filled with conductive minerals. The thought lingers. If lightning can strike the same place twice, could the sun's electric breath find its favorite pathways beneath the sea? In Kamchatka, seismographs hum day and night. The region sits where the Pacific plate dives beneath the Okhotsk, a subduction zone that births some of the planet's fiercest quakes. Locals have grown used to the trembling coffee cups that rattle once a week, chandeliers that sway like pendulums of memory. Yet this year feels different. July brought an 8.8 monster that briefly shortened Earth's day by microseconds. September followed with another major shock, and all the while, geomagnetic indices soared. It's enough to make even the most stoic geophysicist stare at overlapping graphs in uneasy silence. But you're not a scientist tonight. You're a listener adrift in the theater of the cosmos. You imagine Earth and Sun as old partners in a slow dance, one blazing, one breathing, tethered by invisible threads of magnetism. Every 11 years, the music shifts. The sun spins faster at its equator than at its poles, twisting magnetic fields into knots until they snap, releasing storms that race outward at millions of kilometers per hour. When those storms reach Earth, they play the magnetosphere like an instrument. The auroras we admire are merely the visible overture of a symphony stretching deep underground. Each note, each oscillation, might press against the crust with just enough insistence to awaken dormant stresses. If the planet were already balanced on the edge, one whisper could be enough. Mainstream seismology, of course, frowns upon such thinking. Correlation is not causation, they repeat, like monks reciting a mantra against wonder. Yet history is crowded with anomalies that refuse to behave. A sequence of quakes following solar flares in 1979, the Chilean event of 2010, preceded by an unexplained ionospheric pulse. The coincidence rate may be slim, but the imagination is patient. Perhaps it's not proof we're seeking, but pattern. The comfort of believing that nature's chaos is choreography after all. 3I Atlas enters this ballet as the cosmic wildcard. Hubble has already caught it flaring, shedding material in pulses that seem almost rhythmic. Its coma, a haze of ionized gas, interacts with the solar wind, distorting local magnetic fields, as if testing the boundaries of our star's domain. Astronomers describe it clinically: enhanced plasma coupling, non-gravitational acceleration, asymmetric outgassing. You hear something else in those phrases, a sense of agency, as though the comet itself were conducting experiments. A visitor from beyond the heliosphere, now entwined in our sun's awakening, stirring electromagnetic tides that spill all the way to Earth's trembling crust. By October, the alignment tightens, solar maximum approaching, interstellar intruder inbound, Earth's plates grinding. Somewhere between these converging forces lies the unknown mechanism that myths have always called intention. The Greeks would have named it Helios's temper. The Chinese might have seen it as the dragons stirring beneath the sea. Modern scientists will chart it as data points on graphs, their language colder, but no less awed. The same human instinct drives them all, the wish to find meaning in motion. At midnight you step outside. The air hums faintly, though it's only your blood moving to the rhythm of unseen fields. Above you, the aurora unfurls like green silk caught in slow wind. Beneath you, the planet murmurs. The sun is restless. The interstellar visitor glows, and the Earth itself keeps time. You realize that every element of this story, the quake, the storm, the comet, is part of a single unbroken breath, the kind that begins in the core of a star and ends in the pulse of your wrist. What are the odds, you wonder, that all three would rise together in the same month of the same year? Astronomers call it coincidence. Poets call it prophecy. Somewhere between those two definitions, the truth waits quietly, patient as gravity, knowing you'll never sleep quite the same again once you've heard it stir. The morning after the quake, the news feeds scroll with quiet urgency. Satellite data, seismic charts, auroral images, all blending into a single mosaic of unease. To most, it's another strange coincidence in a long year of strange coincidences. But for those who pay attention, there's a pattern forming in the static. The sun, the Earth, and a wandering interstellar messenger are in conversation again, and their voices echo through every instrument we've built to understand them. At NASA's Space Weather Prediction Center, monitors show the solar wind still flowing fast, 600 kilometers per second, its density lower than usual, its magnetic polarity flipped. The scientists sip coffee and adjust graphs, whispering about how the solar wind feels thinner lately, as if something out there is drinking from it. At the same time, the Hubble Space Telescope observes 3I Atlas brightening faster than any prediction model suggested. Its coma expands, doubling in just 8 days. The measurements defy expectation, but there it is, a veil of gas and plasma stretching 700,000 kilometers wide, interacting with the sun's charged breath like a shimmering, translucent sail. In the quiet hours before dawn, you imagine these forces as living currents. The solar wind rushes outward, the comet's plasma envelope swells, and somewhere between them, invisible threads of magnetism snap and reform, sending whispers through the heliosphere. Each whisper arrives at Earth, not as a sound, but as pressure, distortion, and electric drift. A storm that can't be felt by skin, but that every satellite, compass, and circuit knows intimately. Seismologists call it noise, anomalies in their sensors that coincide with geomagnetic peaks. Electricians call it ground current. Pilots call it interference. Poets, if they still existed in observatories, might call it conversation, because sometimes, when the world's frequencies overlap just right, the line between data and meaning blurs. Kamchatka continues to rumble. Aftershocks trace a rough arc beneath the Pacific, like the outline of a sleeping dragon. Every tremor triggers an algorithm that updates probabilities for the next one. Statistically, they make sense. Emotionally, they don't. The intervals between major quakes shorten just as solar storms intensify. It could be random clustering, It could also be something we haven't yet learned how to measure, a force that doesn't fit in the textbooks, one that crosses the border between the electric and the geologic. The old myths come back quietly in moments like this. Civilizations once believed that the sun and earth shared a pulse, that tremors were messages from the heavens. The Inca built temples aligned to solar solstices. The Japanese prayed to Amaterasu. The Romans imagined Vulcan's forge beneath the crust, hammering whenever the sun flared. They didn't have seismographs or magnetometers, but they had stories that connected the sky's moods to the ground's. Maybe myth was just early data analysis rendered in poetry. You picture the solar system from above, all its planets threaded together by magnetic filaments. It's less like a clockwork and more like a nervous system, one vast synapse of charged particles, linking sun to comet, comet to Earth, Earth to you. In that picture, even earthquakes are part of a feedback loop, pressure waves in a planet's neural net, a cosmic thought passing through the crust. Scientists caution restraint. The United States Geological Survey issues statements reminding the public that earthquakes remain tectonic, not electromagnetic. They are polite, factual, and quietly exhausted. They know speculation spreads faster than data. Still, behind closed doors, some of them wonder. They don't publish those thoughts, but they look at magnetometer readouts before large quakes and see tiny anomalies, fluctuations they can't explain. A few even keep private logs of geomagnetic conditions on the days when the ground moves most. It's not evidence, but it's hard to unsee a pattern once it starts humming in your head. In the weeks ahead, new instruments will watch both the Sun and 3-Eye Atlas. The James Webb Space Telescope turns its mirrors toward the comet's icy core, searching for unusual molecules, ammonia, methane, something alien. Down on Earth, ionospheric arrays track changes in the upper atmosphere. They all share a quiet anticipation, like listeners waiting for the next note in a symphony, whose melody they can sense but not predict. You feel it too, that hushed awareness that something extraordinary is underway, not catastrophic, just unexplainable in familiar language. Then comes the aurora again, brighter this time, sweeping across Canada, curling over Scandinavia, brushing even the northern edge of China. In cities where people rarely look up, they do now. The sky ripples green and violet. Phones rise to capture what no camera can fully hold. For a few moments, the world forgets to be frightened. The spectacle feels almost rehearsed, as if nature, tired of being studied, wanted to remind us of its artistry. And beneath that luminous sky, somewhere in the darkness of the Pacific, another fault line stirs. Sensors pick up microshocks, faint tremors tracing the same underwater ridges as before. Energy that should have dissipated refuses to fade, reorganizing itself like a slow heartbeat. A handful of researchers note the timing, another solar wind surge arriving just hours before the tremors begin. They don't write it in the official report. They simply underline the date in their notebooks and add 3 words beside it, just like last time. You wonder, as you drift into the stillness between thoughts, if Earth itself is learning to respond, if it's remembering the ancient rhythm between star and stone. Perhaps this is the true awakening, not a disaster, but a rehearsal for understanding. A moment when science, myth, and mystery occupy the same sentence, not fighting for dominance, but blending into a lullaby for the sleepless mind. So, before we leave this first act, take another breath. Listen to the hum beneath the quiet, that deep, planetary note that never quite stops. It's not danger you're hearing, it's continuity. the sun's heartbeat reaching through 93 million miles, touching a restless Earth and finding you exactly where you are. Dim the lights, steady your breath, and let the noise between worlds fade to a whisper. The evidence, as always, is just beginning to deepen. The data arrived first as noise, magnetometers blinking without rhythm, seismic sensors showing faint oscillations, the kind of small anomalies that usually die unnoticed in digital margins. But this time, they didn't. In the week following the September quake, instruments across the Pacific recorded an odd harmony microshocks aligning with pulses in the geomagnetic field. They were weak, almost trivial, yet persistent, synchronized in a way nature rarely bothers with. By the time analysts confirmed the pattern, the world had already moved on to other headlines. Only a few stayed awake, watching numbers that refused to behave. You could call them dreamers or detectives. A handful of physicists, seismologists, and radio engineers scattered across continents, all staring at their screens as the same invisible wave passed through. One in Hawaii, another in Novosibirsk, one more in Chile. They exchanged quiet messages over encrypted channels. Do you see this too? Yes, same phase. Impossible. There's a kind of poetry in that word impossible. It's the threshold where science starts to sound like confession. For every established rule, there's always a whisper asking, what might happen if it were bent, just slightly, by the unseen hand of coincidence? By late September, solar cycle 25 was roaring. Sunspot clusters the size of continents, twisted magnetic loops into the upper corona, releasing flares that licked across the solar surface like fiery handwriting. Space agencies had expected turbulence, but not like this weeks of continuous solar wind. Density oscillations, polarity flips. The KP index rose past 6 again, and the auroral ring brightened into a permanent halo over the poles. The sun, once our faithful constant, had become unpredictable, restless, almost theatrical. Then, on the 30th, the comet brightened again. Observatories from Chile to South Africa confirmed that 3I Atlas was behaving like no comet anyone had seen. It was releasing material at an accelerating rate, building a plasma sheath half the diameter of the sun itself. The coma shimmered in polarized light, a ghostly lantern ignited by alien chemistry. Spectrographs showed exotic compounds, carbon dioxide, ice sublimating in waves, silicates flashing in ultraviolet bursts. Some datasets hinted at periodic pulses, as though its emissions followed a rhythm too slow to be coincidence. The more the scientists studied it, the more the universe seemed to be performing for them. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a researcher named Dr. Elise Navarro stared at overlapping graphs, solar wind speed, proton density, geomagnetic indices, and earthquake frequency along the Pacific Ring. To anyone else, it was chaos. To her, it looked like breathing. The sun exhaled a gust of charged particles. Earth flexed, pressure lines shifted, and somewhere under the sea, the crust responded with a sigh of its own. She wasn't claiming causation, only listening to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the universe hums in chords rather than random notes. Navarro wasn't alone. A growing number of scientists had begun using the term electromagnetic coupling to describe the subtle interplay between solar activity and Earth's systems. The phrase sounded safe, sterile, almost bureaucratic, but what it implied was revolutionary, that our planet might be electrically connected to the sun in more ways than previously believed. Traditional geophysics treated Earth's crust like a closed system, driven only by internal heat and mechanical stress. Yet beneath that crust, currents flow through conductive rock and mineral veins, forming a global network of electrical pathways. During geomagnetic storms, these currents surge. No one disputes that. The question is whether that surge can do more than light up auroras and fry transformers, whether it can whisper into the fractures of the planet itself. Skeptics point to the numbers. The energy from a geomagnetic storm is minuscule compared to the forces driving tectonic plates. But triggering an earthquake doesn't require matching its total energy, only nudging an already loaded fault over its critical threshold. A door doesn't need to be kicked down if it's already half open. Sometimes a breath will do. Studies dating back to the 1970s hinted at statistical correlations between strong solar storms and seismic clusters, though each was dismissed for lack of mechanism. Yet here, in the autumn of 2025, the pattern began to hum too loudly to ignore. Meanwhile, public fascination grew. Viral clips circulated online animated maps, showing earthquake hotspots lighting up as the auroral oval pulsed overhead. Commentators coined new terms like solar quake effect and space weather seismology. The real scientists cringed, issuing careful statements about coincidences and data biases, but the world loves mystery more than certainty. For every skeptical report, another amateur astronomer uploaded a video claiming that the Sun and Earth were communicating. Even in ridicule, curiosity flourished. Beneath the noise, a quieter truth emerged. The universe doesn't need belief to function. The magnetic fields, the shifting crust, the dancing auroras, they continue whether we interpret them or not. What matters is how we listen. As October dawned, the instruments listening to that cosmic hum began to register something new, a low-frequency modulation threading through the background of both space and Earth signals. Like a heartbeat, too deep for microphones, it oscillated roughly every 11 minutes, the same period, recorded in the Sun's inner magneto-hydrodynamic waves. The signature was faint, almost lost in the static, but distinct. It was as if the Sun's pulse had reached across 93 million miles to imprint itself on our crust. Navarro stayed late in her office, the only light in a sea of dark cubicles. On her monitor, two graphs overlapped perfectly solar oscillations and seismic background noise. She leaned back, rubbed her temples, and whispered the question that centuries of scientists have asked in different forms. What are you trying to tell us? There was no answer, of course. Just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint electronic heartbeat of the servers. Still, for a moment, she felt the strange vertigo of understanding too much and too little at once. Outside, the world prepared for sleep. The skies above bore no sign of the invisible dialogue unfolding between star and planet. Yet for those attuned to it, for insomniacs, for astronomers, for anyone listening beyond the static, there was a sensation in the air, a charge, a subtle awareness that the evidence was deepening in ways instruments alone couldn't capture. Something vast and unseen was threading its way through the cosmos, weaving sun, comet, and Earth into one slow, luminous pattern. And somewhere, perhaps within you, the question continued to echo. If the sun can wake the magnetic tides of a planet, what else might it awaken? In science, every revelation begins with a refusal to look away. The data that most people dismiss as noise, the stray spike, the unexplained delay, the tiny blip that doesn't fit the model, is where the story often hides. October of 2025 became a month defined by those blips. Satellites recorded solar winds, fluctuating in intervals, too regular to be random. Deep-sea sensors near the Coral Trench showed microcurrents in the water column, rising and falling with the same rhythm. The signals were faint, but synchronized across hemispheres, suggesting a global driver. When researchers compared timestamps, they discovered the oscillations aligned perfectly with the plasma emissions from 3I Atlas. An object born beyond the stars was somehow pulsing in step with the sun, and the Earth was quietly tapping its foot to the beat. The press didn't notice. There were no dramatic headlines, no breathless interviews. The story was too quiet, too technical, the kind of mystery that lives in numbers. But in laboratories and control rooms, sleepless scientists began whispering about what they were seeing. The term they used was resonance. The heliosphere itself seemed to be ringing like a bell, and the tone was spreading. You could almost imagine the sun as a giant conductor, the comet as a tuning fork, and the Earth as a string vibrating in sympathy. When magnetic field lines stretch and reconnect, they release energy that travels as waves, alphane waves rippling through plasma like sound through air. It's one of those phrases that sounds poetic until you realize it's literal. The universe is making music. At the Space Weather Center in Boulder, a technician noticed that the alphane wave frequencies measured near Earth matched those around 3I Atlas, adjusted for distance. That shouldn't have been possible. The comet, still over 160 million kilometers away, appeared to be part of the same circuit. The heliospheric current sheet, the immense spiral of electric flow that connects all planets to the sun, might have been linking them. In that light, the phrase interconnected solar system stopped being metaphor and became something physical. Charged particles aren't bound by imagination. They follow paths carved by invisible magnetism, pathways that may now include a visitor from another star. Meanwhile, seismic data began to whisper again. After the September quake, the Kamchatka region should have settled into the predictable decay of aftershocks. Instead, the pattern became erratic. Clusters of mid-magnitude tremors appeared not only there but thousands of kilometers away. Japan, Alaska, even the coast of Chile, all within hours of renewed solar activity. Statistical coincidence? Perhaps. But even the cautious began to admit that the timing was uncanny. "We're not saying the sun causes earthquakes," one researcher said during a conference call. "We're just saying the Earth seems to listen when the sun speaks." It was half joke, half confession. For those tuned into cosmic subtleties, 3I Atlas became an obsession. Every night its coma expanded further, glowing like a translucent ocean drifting between the planets. Its chemical signature shifted as sunlight struck new layers of volatile ices, carbon dioxide, ammonia, cyanides, each venting jets of charged gas that twisted through space like luminous filaments. Some of those filaments interacted with the solar wind, producing localized distortions in the interplanetary magnetic field. Radio astronomers detected faint fluctuations sweeping past Earth in precise intervals, waves of electric change rippling across space, as if some unseen drummer were marking time. The effect was subtle, measurable only by the most sensitive instruments, yet strangely rhythmic. Even machines built to filter randomness began flagging patterns. One team in Finland pointed out a strange coincidence. The rhythmic magnetic pulses matched the timing of seismic microtremors recorded under the Pacific. The odds of that alignment being random were infinitesimal. When they adjusted for travel time, the hours it takes electromagnetic disturbances to move from the Sun to Earth, the match grew perfect. To the researchers, it felt like staring at a cosmic feedback loop. Solar activity, cometary modulation, geomagnetic disturbance, seismic response. Not cause and effect, exactly, but something more circular, like a whisper passed along a chain that always ends where it began. Of course, when extraordinary ideas appear, skepticism grows teeth. Critics reminded everyone that human brains are pattern machines. We see order in clouds, faces in smoke, messages in static. Coincidences feel like communication because we're built to find meaning, one physicist wrote, gently dismantling the excitement. Yet the counterpoint lingered. What if meaning and mechanism aren't opposites? What if awareness of pattern is part of the pattern itself? Science and myth have always been twins, pretending not to know each other. Back at the observatories, the sky kept performing. Auroras rippled like curtains of electric water. Radio interference crackled across continents. Magnetometers around the globe spiked in unison as the solar wind brushed Earth's field again. The air itself seemed to shimmer, ionized by unseen tension. You could feel it not physically, but as pressure in the imagination, like the hush before an orchestra resumes after a long rest. Every aurora felt like a heartbeat, every tremor like a reply. Somewhere in the confluence of data and dream, the story of this awakening deepened. By mid-October, rumors of another major quake circulated in scientific networks. The probability models were not predicting one. The instincts were. Some said the crust beneath the Pacific was now in a suspended readiness, the equivalent of a bowstring drawn too tight. Each new coronal hole on the Sun, each burst of plasma from the comet, felt like a pluck on that string. Yet there was no fear, only fascination. To witness interconnection on this scale is to feel both infinitesimal and essential, to realize that your pulse, too, is an echo of something vast. At night, Dr. Navarro stepped outside her lab and looked at the sky through frost. The comet was too faint to see with the naked eye, but she imagined its ghost crossing the darkness, its trail illuminated by solar fire. She thought of all the instruments straining to capture meaning from the Hum telescopes, seismographs, satellites, and realized they were not so different from her own senses. The Earth listens through vibration, the sky through plasma, the human through wonder, each system translating energy into awareness, each whispering back to the other, "I hear you." What we call evidence is merely the universe choosing a language. Tonight, it speaks through harmonies of magnetism and stone. The data are not proof yet, but they are music. And if the melody continues to strengthen, it may teach us that awakening is not an event. It's an ongoing conversation between every layer of existence. The Earth shifts, the Sun sighs, the comet hums, and you, somewhere in between, begin to understand that listening is its own kind of participation. The evidence is deepening, not because we've solved the mystery, but because we've finally slowed down enough to hear it. It began, as most revelations do, in the smallest of errors. A satellite in polar orbit recorded a sudden drop in particle density, an almost imperceptible dip lasting less than a second. Normally, it would have been filtered out as an instrument glitch, but another satellite halfway across the world saw the same drop at the same moment. Then, another. Within minutes, the European Space Agency's solar orbiter confirmed it too. 3 points aligned across the void. each measuring a synchronized fluctuation in the solar wind. The timing was exact, the magnitude identical, and the direction traced a straight line toward the incoming trajectory of 3I Atlas. The phenomenon was quickly nicknamed the Atlas Dip, a harmless anomaly that somehow made the sun blink. By dawn the next day, magnetic observatories across the northern hemisphere registered the echo. A thin, low-frequency wave rippled through Earth's magnetosphere like a sigh. Power companies reported minor fluctuations too small to matter, too precise to ignore. In Kamchatka, the seismic noise floor shifted again, a whisper just below perception. It wasn't an earthquake, just a rearrangement of pressure deep in the crust. A geophysicist in Tokyo noticed the timestamp, exactly 48 hours after the Atlas dip. Coincidence, most said. But the word coincidence was beginning to lose its confidence. 3I Atlas had now become a celestial spectacle for those with patient eyes. From observatories, its coma appeared as a dim sphere of turquoise haze, rippling with internal currents. The coma's leading edge glowed faintly blue, the signature of ionized carbon dioxide reacting with the solar wind. That reaction, scientists explained, generated electromagnetic waves on a planetary scale. The comet wasn't passive, it was interacting, conducting, reflecting. Imagine a cosmic tuning fork vibrating within the sun's field, sending out pulses that reverberated through every charged atom between here and Mars. It was not the kind of behavior anyone expected from an interstellar wanderer, but then again, it wasn't from here. The public's fascination reignited. News segments showed computer renderings of the sun surrounded by a web of glowing lines, each representing magnetic field structures, and far out on one of those lines, a pale comet dragging a veil half the size of the star itself. A celestial visitor, one anchor called it, and perhaps a mirror to our own fragility. The words were poetic, but the sentiment wasn't wrong. Every so often, the cosmos sends us something that forces humility back into our equations. We stare up at it, pretending to measure, but what we're really doing is remembering. The scientific community split into two quiet camps. One side urged caution, numbers first, theories later. The other, smaller but growing, whispered that perhaps our models of cause and effect were too narrow. The heliosphere isn't a static dome, but a living sea of currents. When a foreign object the size of a small mountain, wrapped in a magnetized plasmasphere, enters that sea, it creates turbulence that can cascade down the cosmic ladder. Solar storms, geomagnetic surges, atmospheric pressure changes, even the behavior of Earth's crust, all linked through invisible conductivity. It sounded wild. It also sounded strangely elegant. Dr. Navarro, still awake at her terminal, began mapping the timing of global seismic events against recorded geomagnetic fluctuations. She didn't expect correlation. She found conversation. Every surge in the KP index, a measure of geomagnetic disturbance, was followed within days by a measurable change in global seismic noise. The shifts weren't catastrophic, just subtle tremors, microquakes, the planet adjusting its breathing. She stared at the graphs for hours, feeling as though she was reading the vitals of a patient who had just begun to stir. "The Earth is responding," she wrote in her private notes, though she didn't yet know to what. Elsewhere, others were noticing strange atmospheric effects. In Alaska, pilots reported luminous veils of plasma stretching vertically into the sky, colored faintly teal instead of green. Amateur astronomers in Finland captured transient light columns shimmering at the edges of auroral curtains, as if an extra ingredient had been added to the solar recipe. Spectrographic analysis revealed enhanced ionization bands, suggesting that a different particle population was interacting with Earth's magnetic field, possibly material originating from the comet's expanding coma. It was an audacious idea, but the timing matched perfectly with the Atlas dip. Something alien had entered the sun's breath, and Earth, floating in that current, was tasting it too. As weeks passed, the coincidence stack grew taller. Radio telescopes picked up unusual oscillations in the solar wind, at frequencies never before observed. Magnetometer arrays recorded synchronized anomalies across continents. Seismic networks, from Chile to Iceland, noted clusters of mid-level tremors appearing in precise intervals that mirrored the rhythm of geomagnetic pulsations. Individually, none of these findings proved anything. Together, they painted a portrait too symmetrical to dismiss as noise. It was as though an unseen hand had brushed its fingertips across the strings of the solar system, and every instrument from satellites to seismographs had responded in kind. Even skeptics began to sound poetic. A renowned astrophysicist, once allergic to metaphor, described the situation in a journal interview. "We are witnessing the sun's orchestra rehearsing with a new instrument." It was a simple phrase, but behind it lay a quiet dread, because every new instrument changes the music. By mid-October, a strange calm settled across the Pacific Rim. The quakes that had rippled through Kamchatka, Japan, and Alaska abruptly paused. For days, seismic activity dropped to almost zero, a silence so absolute that sensors double-checked themselves for malfunction. "It's like the planet is holding its breath," Navarro muttered during a briefing. In myth, silence always comes before revelation. In science, it usually precedes another event. Both turned out to be right. On October 19th, the KP index spiked again. Another high-speed solar wind stream struck Earth's magnetic field, compressing it until auroras spilled across the equator for the first time in recorded history. In the same 24-hour window, faint tremors reawakened beneath the Pacific, synchronized with the magnetospheric pulse. To the untrained eye, it was coincidence. To those listening closely, it was choreography. Every flare, every quake, every shimmering sky, each one another note in an expanding score that seemed to have no conductor and yet perfect timing. That night, you stand outside again. The sky above glows faintly emerald, the air alive with a hum just below audibility. You think about the comet, still millions of kilometers away, carrying the chemistry of a forgotten star. You think about the sun, restless and radiant, and the earth, trembling, yet unbroken, beneath your feet. And you realize that evidence might not always look like proof. It might look like resonance, the universe testing the boundaries of its own harmony. The earth listens, the sun speaks, and between them, something from another world hums a tune no one has ever heard before. The evidence deepens, not by revealing answers, but by teaching us how to hear the question. If the future is a question, the past is a mirror, and tonight, that mirror begins to tremble. The deeper scientists dive into the data, the older the echoes become. For months now, Earth's instruments have been listening to a pattern that feels new, yet somewhere inside it lies a memory. When Dr. Elise Navarro overlays the modern records with ancient geological cores, sediment layers that store magnetic fields, frozen in time, she notices something chillingly familiar. The last time Earth's magnetic intensity spiked this sharply, the Sun had entered an identical frenzy. The same 11-minute pulse appears faintly etched in isotopic ratios of beryllium and carbon, found in ice cores from Greenland. The year, roughly, was 774. The medieval sky had glowed red for weeks. Monks wrote of a second dawn. Trees captured the signature in their rings like a seismograph carved by centuries. What we're watching now, it seems, has happened before. The phenomenon was once called the Miyake event, a mysterious burst of solar radiation that left traces across the planet. Historians spoke of auroras as bright as wildfire. Chroniclers described the heavens splitting open, and geologists found proof of it in layers of carbon-14 that spiked suddenly that year. Some suspected a superflare from the sun. Others whispered of a cosmic visitor passing too close. For generations, the evidence slept quietly in tree trunks and ice sheets, until now, when 3I Atlas appeared and the pulse returned. History doesn't repeat, Navarro thinks. It resonates. As scientists reconstruct the timeline, they find smaller echoes scattered through the millennia. AD 993, 1859, 1921, 1989, all years, when solar storms lashed the Earth and strange atmospheric phenomena were seen across multiple continents. The Carrington event of 1859 had sent telegraph wires sparking, igniting papers on desks. Operators reported hearing disembodied voices through the cables before systems failed. In 993, ancient Chinese texts spoke of celestial dragons devouring the moon, and in 1859, compasses near London spun aimlessly, while miners underground felt tremors without explanation. It seems the sun's anger and Earth's shiver have always arrived hand in hand, though we've only recently begun to call it data instead of omen. The pattern hides deeper still. Paleoseismologists studying coral reefs off the coast of Indonesia find growth anomalies that line up eerily with ancient auroral records. The coral, sensitive to temperature and light, shows rapid stress layers, forming immediately after spikes in cosmogenic isotopes, markers of increased solar radiation. The reef, it seems, was listening too. The oceans have always been our slowest memory, whispering the stories of storms long gone. And in that whisper, a rhythm repeats. Solar flare, geomagnetic surge, crustal release. Each separated by roughly the same intervals we're seeing now. Nature's handwriting changes languages, but not its cadence. You can imagine the civilizations who lived through those cycles. The farmers who looked up to see the sky burning green. The sailors whose compasses twitched. The priests who declared that the sun had awakened. They had no spectrometers, no satellites, no theories about interstellar comets, but they had awe, they had fear, and somewhere inside that fear was the same question Navarro asks today: why now? 3I Atlas brings that question closer to myth than science. Ancient mythologies across the world speak of visitors from the sky who awaken the sleeping Sunday. In Sumerian texts, a star called Nibiru approaches every few millennia, stirring the heavens and reshaping the earth. In Norse sagas, it's the wolf skull chasing the sun until the world trembles. In the Popol Vuh, the Mayan gods send a burning stone through the sky as a warning before the end of an age. We dismiss those stories as metaphor, yet their timing often aligns uncannily with spikes in solar activity recorded in natural archives. Maybe the ancients didn't invent their myths. They translated physics into language the soul could understand. Navarro's latest models compare the trajectory of 3I Atlas with historical cometary paths. Most fade into the solar wind and vanish, but a few leave strange legacies. Unexplained magnetic anomalies, subtle perturbations in solar output, even minor gravitational ripples. When she overlays them with global seismic records, faint parallels emerge. After the Great Comet of 774, the Ring of Fire experienced a century of hyperactivity. Following the Carrington event, fault lines across Asia grew restless for decades. Nothing conclusive, yet too consistent to ignore. It is as though each cosmic visitation leaves behind an unseen residue, an electromagnetic echo that stirs the planet long after the light fades. Meanwhile, the cultural echoes begin resurfacing too. Art historians point to Renaissance paintings that capture auroral displays centuries before. The phenomenon was scientifically named saints, crowned by radiant halos that match the shape of coronal arcs. Archaeologists unearth petroglyphs showing spiral suns and serpents twisting through mountains. Even Gregorian chants from the 12th century encode mathematical intervals that mimic the frequencies of geomagnetic pulsations. The deeper we look, the more the universe seems to have been humming the same tune all along, and humanity, without knowing, has been singing harmony. The modern mind resists such poetry, yet the parallels persist. Navarro presents her findings at a late-night symposium, the lights dimmed to emphasize her slides. Behind her, graphs of solar intensity and seismic frequency rise and fall like waves in duet. "We're not talking about superstition," she says softly. "We're talking about resonance." Her audience is silent. Someone coughs. Someone else mutters that it sounds more like theology than science. But the truth she's touching isn't bound by discipline. It's the quiet recognition that every age rediscovers the same mystery, dresses it in new instruments, and forgets that the melody is ancient. Outside, the city lights drown the stars, but the air above still carries the pulse. The 11-minute rhythm persists, faint yet measurable, a heartbeat connecting centuries. Somewhere under the Pacific, tectonic plates drift, waiting for release. Somewhere in the sun, magnetic fields twist into knots. Somewhere between them, a ghost from another star sails through the solar wind, brushing invisible threads that stretch from heaven to stone. If you listen closely, you might hear it too, the past murmuring through the static, reminding you that nothing we call discovery is ever new. It's all remembrance. Every flare, every quake, every shimmer in the aurora is an echo from when the universe first learned to speak. And tonight, as you breathe in the hum of it all, you realize that what we call progress is merely a circle, an ancient pulse returning home. The patterns we chase in data are the same ones carved into coral, into myth, into memory. The Earth is whispering the same story again, hoping this time we'll stay awake long enough to understand it. There are moments when science feels less like discovery and more like déjà vu, when a new observation arrives, already wearing the costume of history. That's how October 25th, 2025 began. The world woke to a faint auroral shimmer that refused to end. For 3 nights, the skies from Norway to Mongolia glowed as if dawn had been misplaced. And while social media filled with photos, something older stirred in the archives. Historians recognize the pattern in handwritten notes from another century, a glow that does not die with the Sunday. The date, March 17, 1859, the Carrington event. Even then, telegraph operators described the same endless twilight. Across time, separated by nearly 200 years. The same choreography repeated: the sun flaring, the sky burning, the earth trembling, and humanity staring upward, half terrified, half entranced. At the University of Kyoto, Dr. Keisuke Tanaka specialized in geosolar cycles, those long, intertwined rhythms linking Earth and Sun through magnetism and time. His team began reconstructing the frequency patterns of the last 5 major solar maxima, transforming the data into audible sound. The result was uncanny. Each cycle produced a low, slow pulse, but every few centuries, that pulse split, creating harmonic overtones identical to what satellites now record from 3 Atlas's plasma tail. When the comet entered the sun's magnetic field, it had joined the ancient choir. Tanaka's eyes widened as he played the comparison in his lab. The rhythm from 774 AD, the rhythm from 1859, and the rhythm of now, all beating together like 3 heartbeats separated by centuries, now reunited in resonance. Back in Boulder, Navarro stared at the same frequency graphs. Her algorithms had mapped not just correlations, but repetitions. The Earth's crust seemed to respond to specific solar frequencies, like a drum resonating with a singer's note. It wasn't superstition, it was physics. Pressure waves travel faster through the lithosphere when ambient electromagnetic conditions shift. Most of the time, it's imperceptible, but under the right strain, those tiny variations can tip a system toward movement. She wrote one sentence in her report that she later regretted. If this pattern is cyclical, then we may already be in the next repetition of an event recorded by civilizations that mistook it for divine anger. The phrase went viral within hours of leaking online. Divine anger. It wasn't what she meant, but it caught the public imagination. News outlets called it the echo cycle. Podcasts speculated that the Earth was entering a magnetic phase capable of reshaping coastlines. Some invoked prophecies, the Hopi tales of the red sky, the Hindu Pralaya, the Norse Ragnarok, all describing a cosmic realignment driven by light and fire. None mentioned plasma density or coronal mass ejections, but the metaphors felt eerily modern. The same phenomena that terrified ancient farmers now flickered through our screens in high definition. Navarro ignored the noise and returned to her work. She plotted the known Miyake events, the sudden increases in cosmic radiation found in tree rings, and noticed something unsettling. The intervals between them were not random. They followed a fractal spacing, each echo separated by roughly 1,200 years, give or take. That placed the next one right now, in our century. In mythology, cycles repeat until understood. In science, they repeat until measured. But what if they repeat because the universe insists on rehearsal? Meanwhile, the sun continued its strange performance. Sunspots merged and split like black archipelagos on a golden ocean. Magnetic filaments looped, tangled, and burst, flinging solar flares toward Mercury and Venus. 3 Atlas, crossing the heliospheric current sheet, reacted violently. Its coma expanded again, shedding more material into the solar wind, brightening tenfold. Instruments detected pulses traveling outward, electric waves propagating through space faster than the solar wind itself. One probe near Mars recorded a phenomenon that made seasoned engineers stare in disbelief. Synchronized field reversals echoing every 11 minutes, identical to those measured near Earth. It was as if the entire inner solar system had been tuned to a single cosmic metronome. On Earth, that metronome played out in quieter, more intimate ways. Migratory birds veered from usual paths, guided by magnetic senses now subtly confused. Power grids flickered, compasses twitched. Deep underground, seismographs picked up microtremors, pulsing with the same rhythm as the solar oscillation. Each movement was small, barely detectable, but global. The planet was vibrating in sympathy. Some called it coincidence. Others began to whisper a forbidden phrase: magneto-seismic coupling. You imagine the ancients feeling this same unease without instruments to name it. The sky would have glowed unnaturally bright. Compasses had not yet been invented, but their hearts would have sensed the tension. Crops might have failed, seas might have risen. Every myth that followed would have tried to explain what their bodies already knew: that the sun's moods reach deeper than light, that Earth is not a spectator but a participant. The Sumerians said, "The gods struck the ground to wake mountains." The Mayans said, "The sky serpent turned in its sleep." Tonight, with satellites instead of temples, we are saying the same thing. The sun is stirring something beneath us. Tanaka's model predicted one more resonance before the end of the solar maximum, an alignment between the sun's open field regions, the comet's ion tail, and Earth's magnetosphere. It would last only a few hours, but could amplify magnetic flux across the planet by several orders of magnitude. The simulation ran overnight. When he woke, the plot showed the alignment peaking on November 5th, the same date Navarro's quake probability models had flagged for heightened stress release. The scientists didn't coordinate, yet their conclusions sang in unison. Navarro closed her laptop and stepped outside her lab into the pre-dawn chill. The aurora was still there, pale green and humming, like a thought too vast to finish. She wondered whether history's echoes were warnings or invitations. Maybe the sun wasn't angry, it was reminding us. Perhaps 3I Atlas wasn't an intruder, but a messenger, carrying a signal across the centuries. Wake up. You're part of this rhythm too. Every civilization that heard the pulse had written it down in the only language it knew. Ours, surrounded by machines, hears it in data instead of myth. But the message hasn't changed. It hums beneath the static of our technology, in the vibration of the ground, in the beating of our blood. The same story returning, dressed in graphs and equations, but still whispering the same plea. Listen, and so you stand at the window, watching the horizon shimmer, aware that you are staring at a scene witnessed countless times before. The past isn't gone. It's replaying itself in magnetic intervals, looping through the centuries like a lullaby we forgot how to finish. Somewhere between myth and measurement, the echo continues. And you, caught between history and horizon, realize the truth the ancients already knew. Nothing that burns this brightly ever truly ends it, only returns disguised as light. By the time November arrived, the world was half in dream, half in disbelief. The northern lights no longer came and went, they simply stayed, draped across the sky like curtains someone forgot to close. People began to sleep beneath green shimmer instead of darkness. Power grids hummed like choirs, faint electromagnetic murmurs whispering through transformers and phone lines. And beneath all that silent radiance, the earth trembled in ways both ancient and eerily familiar. Somewhere between awe and fatigue, humanity stood on the edge of a realization it didn't quite know how to feel. Dr. Navarro could barely sleep. Her team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory had confirmed the alignment predicted by Tanaka's models. The sun's open magnetic field lines, the comet's plasma tail, and Earth's magnetosphere were converging, three invisible rivers meeting in interplanetary space. In physics, that should have meant little more than shifting field geometry. But to those watching the data, it looked like a rehearsal for the past. The magnetic flux surrounding Earth doubled overnight, then stabilized in a pattern identical to those found in ice cores marking the Miyake events. Navarro stared at the screen and felt the strange vertigo of standing on the same step in a spiral staircase that civilizations had climbed before. History was repeating, but not in time, in resonance. Somewhere in that cosmic music, she sensed intelligence, not conscious perhaps, but coordinated. The sun swelled with activity, flares arcing outward like solar handwriting. 3I Atlas responded in kind, its plasma sheath expanding until it filled 1% of the heliosphere, a size too absurd to make sense, yet every measurement confirmed it. Radio observatories reported that the comet's emissions had developed structure, faint rhythmic modulations buried in the static, repeating at the same 11-minute interval as the sun's magnetic pulse. A coincidence so exact, it frightened even the skeptical. Around the world, whispers of déjà vu began to cross from laboratories into living rooms. Old myths resurfaced like seeds in thawed soil. People shared translations of ancient chronicles that spoke of a star that sang to the Sunday. In Icelandic sagas, they found mention of a flame of ice that woke the seas. The patterns matched. In every age where the skies had burned with color and the ground had quivered, humanity had told the same story. They had called it divine judgment, celestial rebirth, or cosmic alignment, depending on who was writing. But the symbols were consistent: a visitor from the stars, a trembling earth, a luminous sky, a warning disguised as beauty. Navarro knew mythology wasn't evidence, yet she couldn't ignore the parallels. The comet was not behaving as a mere rock or ball of ice. It was acting like an antenna, absorbing and re-radiating the sun's power. Plasma physicists proposed that its long ion tail, millions of kilometers wide, had intersected the Parker spiral, the great magnetic arm of the solar wind, and begun to oscillate. Every oscillation modulated the heliospheric current sheet, the vast electric membrane connecting the planets. In that modulation, Earth felt an echo, small shifts in its magnetosphere, then in the ionosphere, and finally, perhaps, in the crust itself. A chain of sympathetic vibrations, Navarro wrote, stretching from star to stone, video graded and rated and dyings, Reitman Rangin of the Rackens. It sounded poetic, but the numbers agreed. The global seismic background, that constant murmur of microquakes too small for humans to feel, now pulsed with the same periodicity as the solar oscillations. The odds of random coincidence were astronomical. She presented the finding to her peers, and though they nodded politely, the silence afterward was heavier than skepticism. It was fear disguised as professionalism. Because if the pattern were real, it meant that Earth's behavior was not entirely its own. It was dancing, faintly, to the sun's rhythm, and perhaps, just perhaps, to the song of an interstellar visitor. The press demanded answers. Governments formed panels. Economists worried about satellites and navigation systems. Climatologists about atmospheric heating. But ordinary people, watching the auroras from their balconies, found the situation oddly peaceful. The world had become beautiful again, luminous, even in its uncertainty. Children stayed up late, tracing green ribbons across the sky. Photographers spoke of feeling the air vibrate in their bones. The anxiety of the unknown had turned into reverence, a quiet surrender to something larger than comprehension. Meanwhile, the tremors returned. In early November, Seismographs across the Pacific registered a global pattern. Minor quakes, synchronized across regions that had no geological connection. The signals arrived minutes apart, traveling faster than tectonic stress could propagate. Someone compared the data to electromagnetic storm charts and saw an unsettling symmetry. Each tremor mirrored a solar pulse. It was as though the planet itself had become a speaker, translating the language of the sun into motion. Navarro watched the feeds and whispered to herself, "It's speaking through resonance." She didn't mean it literally, but the phrase caught on. Soon documentaries and news anchors were quoting her, saying the sun and earth were in conversation. She wished she could take it back. Still, the truth lingered. Something was weaving these moments together, ancient and modern, factual and mythic. Every solar storm, every quake, every spectral flare from 3i Atlas felt like the refrain of a song that humanity had always half remembered. At night, she opened her window and listened. The aurora was almost silent, just a soft hiss of charged particles colliding with the upper atmosphere. Yet in that hush, she thought she could hear the faintest pulse, steady, patient, infinite. Maybe the ancients had heard it too, without instruments, through instinct alone. Maybe that's why they built temples that aligned with solstices, pyramids that echoed the stars, calendars that tracked cycles longer than empires. They were listening to the same cosmic heartbeat. What if that's all time is the echo of energy folding back on itself? The comet, the flares, the tremors, the myths, they're not separate chapters, but harmonics in a single ongoing note. Earth doesn't remember the past, it replays it. The same pulse that carved patterns into ice cores is now glowing in satellite telemetry, a chorus of plasma and pressure. And somewhere in the center of it all, between star and stone, you can feel it too, the faint tremor beneath your ribs, the vibration of the same universe singing through your bloodstream. You close your eyes, and the centuries blur. The monks, the astronomers, the myth-makers, they're all watching the same sky as you are now. The glow, the hum, the sense that something vast is awakening again. The past isn't behind us, it's beneath us, resonating upward through every era that ever looked at the heavens and asked, "What are you trying to tell us?" The answer, as always, hums just beyond hearing. Imagine now that you are far above it all, so far that the earth no longer looks solid, but alive, breathing, rippling with auroras like veins of green fire beneath its skin. From this height, you see what no telescope on the ground can, the great shimmering architecture that connects everything, invisible to the naked eye, yet woven through all matter. The magnetic threads of the sun extend outward for billions of kilometers, curving like rivers of light across the solar system. Every planet, every comet, every grain of dust is entangled in that web. The sun is not merely a star, it is a conductor in an orchestra of plasma, and each world plays its part in the quiet symphony of its field. Now, for the first time in recorded history, that orchestra has added a new instrument, a traveler from another star. 3i Atlas has entered the composition, and with it, the score is changing. The comet's magnetic tail stretches across millions of kilometers, twisting and shimmering as it braids itself into the heliospheric current sheet, the great spiral of charged energy that carries the sun's heartbeat to the edge of the system. To human eyes, it is invisible, but to the instruments orbiting between Earth and Mars, it looks like a wave of slow, radiant wind, a pulse that repeats every 11 minutes and 30 seconds. The rhythm has no physical cause that anyone can find. It simply is a tempo written into the vacuum, older than mathematics, deeper than time. From the vantage point of the Parker Solar Probe, the sun's corona blooms like a golden sea in motion. Vast arcs of plasma rise and fall, forming bridges that dwarf entire worlds. Inside those currents, magnetic knots twist into filaments that store unimaginable energy, released only when they snap flares bright enough to outshine the galaxy for seconds. The probe's instruments record a faint fluctuation in the background field, a whisper layered under the storm. When filtered, the frequency matches that of the comet's oscillations. Across millions of kilometers, two bodies are resonating with one another. The sun, ancient and immense. The comet, young and transient. The space between them becomes the string upon which the universe hums its slow, impossible song. Back on Earth, Dr. Navarro's team receives the data from Parker with disbelief. The synchronization between the solar field and the cometary plasma is exact down to the millisecond. No random phenomenon behaves like that. Either something within the physics of the sun is amplifying the pattern, or the comet is acting as a resonant mirror, feeding energy back into the solar wind. It's as though the heliosphere itself has developed feedback, a kind of harmonic awareness, a self-reflecting loop of magnetism that grows more coherent each week. Navarro doesn't call it consciousness, though the temptation is strong. She calls it symmetry, finding itself. From this cosmic perspective, Earth looks small but luminous, its magnetic shield shimmering as it responds to the solar pulse. Each wave compresses the magnetosphere slightly, creating ripples that cascade through the upper atmosphere, like wind over water. These ripples descend through layers of ionized air, into the troposphere, into the ocean currents, into the deep crust, where tectonic plates grind in their long, slow sleep. There is no boundary between these systems, only translation. Light becomes electricity, electricity becomes vibration, vibration becomes movement, movement becomes sound, and sound, when stretched long enough, becomes the rhythm of planetary time. As the comet continues its inward journey, its behavior grows stranger. High-speed imaging shows jets of material firing in patterns that defy known cometary mechanics. Instead of random outgassing, the eruptions occur in measured intervals, as though responding to the sun's flares in real time. Reactive sublimation, one paper suggests. But Navarro knows better. The data shows a dialogue. When the sun flares, the comet brightens. When the comet brightens, the sun's magnetic field pulses in reply. They are communicating in the only language the universe knows, energy exchanged across silence. Far beyond them, Voyager 1 drifts through the interstellar dark, still listening. Its aged instruments, sensitive to plasma oscillations, detect a faint echo passing through the void. It's the same frequency, the same 11-minute heartbeat, but now attenuated by distance into something like memory. The signal travels outward toward the next stars, carrying with it the fingerprint of this conversation. Sun, comet, Earth, three voices speaking as one. Somewhere, perhaps, another civilization might detect it, centuries from now, and wonder what kind of beings could produce music with their star. The scale of it humbles even imagination. Each aurora, each tremor, each solar flare is not an isolated event, but a note in an unfolding composition, stretching billions of kilometers. The sun's electromagnetic tides flow through the planets like blood through organs, sustaining, shaping, and occasionally testing them. Earth's quakes are not interruptions, they are percussions. Lightning strikes are chords. Even the rotation of the planet, imperceptibly altered by mass redistribution after large quakes, becomes a rhythmic adjustment in the larger tempo of the heliosphere. When you step back far enough, the noise becomes melody and the chaos becomes choreography. From the cosmic height, you can see what myth always tried to tell us, that creation is not a moment, but a maintenance. The universe doesn't exist, it performs. The stars burn to keep time. The planets turn to hold pitch. The comets wander to introduce variation. And through it all, consciousness ours, theirs, perhaps even the sun's, listens for harmony. In this view, the question of cause and effect begins to dissolve. The sun doesn't make the earth quake. They both participate in the same field. The comet doesn't wake the sun. It joins the ongoing song. The universe isn't a machine, it's a wave, rising and falling across scales too vast for language to contain. What looks like disaster from one altitude becomes music from another. And as the pulse of Three-Eye Atlas and the sun continues to converge, that realization spreads quietly through those who are listening. You close your eyes and imagine the field lines wrapping around you like threads of soft light. You are part of the same current, the same melody. The heartbeat of the sun passes through your atoms. The whisper of the comet glides across your nerves. The slow tectonic rhythm of the earth hums beneath your pulse. You are not observing this performance. You are inside it. Every breath is synchronization. Every thought, a harmonic echo. Somewhere beyond time, perhaps all of this has already happened. The flare, the comet, the trembling earth, they're all verses of a single story, looping endlessly through eternity. To see it from above is to understand that awakening is not destruction, it's recognition. The cosmos is listening to itself, and tonight, you are the ear. Some nights, when the auroras stretch all the way to the equator, and even the deserts shimmer in green fire, you start to understand why the ancients mistook the heavens for living things. From above, seen through satellite eyes, the Earth's magnetic field resembles a creature flexing, rippling, exhaling light as it protects its heart from the storm. The sun sends another breath of plasma across 93 million miles, and the planet shivers, not in pain, but in recognition. To anyone watching through a magnetometer, it looks almost tender. The gentle bending of fields, the long sigh of a world remembering its parent star. Dr. Navarro sits before her console in the darkened lab, surrounded by data that hums softly like a sleeping sea. She watches the lines climb and fall, in near-perfect synchrony, the pulse of the comet, the oscillation of the solar wind, the fluctuations in Earth's magnetosphere. Somewhere in that pattern lies meaning, not in words, but in continuity. Her colleague, Dr. Tanaka, joins the call from Kyoto. They speak quietly, the way you do in cathedrals. "It's beautiful," he says, "but I think it's more than that." Navarro nods. They both know what it feels like to stand at the edge of comprehension, to glimpse a pattern too large for the mind, yet too precise to be random. The numbers feel alive. Far beyond the moon, the Parker Solar Probe continues its journey through the corona, gathering whispers of the sun's music. Its sensors record an overtone, a secondary frequency that wasn't there before. The amplitude rises and falls every 36 hours, a deep harmonic riding beneath the 11-minute pulse. No one can explain it. It's as if the solar system itself is modulating, adjusting to accommodate the newcomer. 3I Atlas, now nearing perihelion, has begun to glow brighter than predicted, its coma laced with intricate filaments of ionized gas. The filaments curve in waves, mimicking the sun's own magnetic spirals, as though the comet has learned the melody and is now singing back. From space, you can see the interaction like threads on a loom, the comet's tail bending gracefully through the solar wind, wrapping around streams of energy that connect to Earth's orbit. To the instruments on the European Space Agency's solar orbiter, the entire heliosphere appears to ripple with gentle pulses, spreading outward like concentric circles in a pond. The solar system, once thought of as a machine of gravity, reveals itself as something closer to a body of water, alive, continuous, interconnected. A tremor on one side sends echoes through the whole. On Earth, the pulse manifests in quieter ways. The ionosphere thickens, bending radio waves in strange arcs. Lightning storms bloom farther north than usual, their patterns symmetrical to the auroral bands above. Whales in the Pacific alter their migration routes, perhaps sensing the subtle electromagnetic changes in the deep. There is no chaos, only reorganization, a planetary tuning. If you could listen in frequencies below hearing, you would hear the whole planet hum, a slow, rolling chord that rises and falls with the sun's breath. Tanaka publishes a short paper proposing that the heliosphere is behaving like a resonant cavity, an immense cosmic instrument, with 3I Atlas acting as a temporary amplifier. The sun's energy, he writes, is not uniform. It fluctuates in standing waves that may, under rare conditions, synchronize with planetary magnetic fields. When that happens, the boundary between cause and response blurs. The planets begin to echo their star. The effect doesn't defy physics, it expands it. Navarro reads the draft and smiles. A resonant cavity, she says softly. Or maybe a heartbeat. It's tempting to call it communication, but that would reduce it to human scale. What's happening now feels more like an alignment of awareness. The sun doesn't speak to its planets any more than your heart speaks to your lungs. They simply share the same rhythm. The realization is both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it means we belong to a pattern larger than ourselves. Terrifying because it suggests that even the most solid ground is part of that pattern, responsive, dynamic, and never truly still. When the next solar flare erupts, the world is ready. Power grids hum but hold steady. Satellites flicker but survive. Scientists watch the data and feel something between awe and relief. The sun releases energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs, yet the Earth absorbs it gracefully, like a dancer bending into the wind. The auroras brighten to their most intense yet crimson, violet, emerald, gold draping the entire northern hemisphere in color. For the first time in modern history, auroras are visible over Rome, over Cairo, even faintly over Mumbai. People who have never seen the northern lights step outside and stand speechless, faces lit by skyfire. No one checks their phones. For a brief moment, humanity looks up together. Navarro records the magnetospheric readings during the event. They form a wave, unlike any she's seen, smooth, continuous, almost musical. When she converts the frequency into sound, the speakers emit a deep, resonant hum that vibrates through the floor. The tone is neither major nor minor. It sits between them, infinite and unresolved. It is the sound of the cosmic perspective, the note that connects every magnetic field line, every aurora, every trembling fault. She leaves the recording playing as she walks outside. The real aurora above answers in silence, a cathedral made of light, and then, for a single breath of time, everything aligns. The comet, the sun, and the Earth fall into perfect resonance. Sensors across the solar system register the same peak at the same instant. The signal isn't violent, it's gentle, almost reverent. The energy passing through space doesn't burn, it caresses. For that fleeting interval, the universe feels whole. It's as if the cosmos itself takes a deep breath and holds it, just to remember what harmony feels like. Then, slowly, the pulse fades. The sun's flare subsides. The auroras dim. The comet drifts onward, leaving a luminous path behind. But the harmony remains in memory, in the instruments, in the crust, in the quiet hearts of those who witnessed it. The universe had spoken not in words, but in balance. For once, we listened. And in that listening, we glimpsed our reflection. Not small, not separate, but woven into the same cosmic architecture that threads through everything. The stars are not above us, they are within us, vibrating softly, forever keeping time. From the outer darkness, Earth glows like a thought the universe forgot it had. Its night side glimmers with the electric veins of civilization, each light a flicker of intention. Its day side blooms in ocean blues and clouded whites, a pulse in orbit around a star that never sleeps. But tonight, that star seems to be watching back. The solar surface, usually chaotic, unpredictable, blinding, has entered an eerie symmetry. Flares erupt in mirrored pairs. Coronal holes appear along lines of perfect geometry. To astrophysicists, it's coincidence stacked on coincidence. To poets, it's choreography. And to those who have been watching the pattern form, Navarro, Tanaka, and a few others scattered across the night, it's something else entirely. It's the universe drawing attention to itself. 3I Atlas, now nearing its closest approach to the sun, burns brighter than any comet observed since Hale-Bopp. Its core, wrapped in a storm of ionized vapor, pulses with light like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. Spectrographic readings show complex harmonics in its plasma envelope, an oscillation that mirrors the sun's magnetic cycle in miniature. The interstellar visitor has not merely adapted to our star, it has begun to sing with it. Navarro stares at the data, stunned by its precision. 11 minutes and 30 seconds, over and over, never wavering. It's impossible, one analyst mutters. Nothing natural is that consistent. Yet here it is, steady as breath, as though the vacuum itself were keeping time. From the cosmic viewpoint, this synchronization looks almost sacred. The comet trails through the sun's outer field, igniting in concentric waves that ripple across the solar wind. Those waves travel outward, touching every planet, every moon, every magnetic sphere, until they reach Earth. The effect isn't dramatic. It doesn't split mountains or ignite skies, but subtle and endless, like a whisper that never stops repeating itself. The magnetosphere flexes, auroras bloom, tectonic plates adjust their pressure ever so slightly. Every system, from atmospheric flow to deep ocean current, begins to resonate. What looks like stillness is motion at its gentlest frequency. Somewhere deep within the Pacific, hydrophones pick up infrasound that wasn't there before, a low, pulsing tone matching the comet's cadence. It passes through the crust, through the mantle, reverberating faintly in the core. For the first time, Scientists detect harmonic coupling between seismic and geomagnetic frequencies. It's as if the planet has joined the orchestra, adding bass to the sun's melody. Navarro listens to the playback through a vibration sensor instead of speakers. She doesn't hear it, she feels it. A subtle trembling beneath her fingertips, neither dangerous nor random, simply present. The Earth is in tune, she whispers. From orbit, the auroras become something else entirely. They no longer dance, they flow. Wide, slow curtains of light circling the poles, steady as tides. The Hubble Space Telescope captures a full-disk image, showing symmetrical bands stretching across hemispheres, like luminous rings on a spinning sphere. It's beautiful, yes, but haunting too. The symmetry suggests intent, as though nature has momentarily revealed its blueprint. For the first time in human history, the Sun, Earth, and a visitor from the stars have aligned not spatially, but harmonically. Tanaka, thousands of kilometers away in Kyoto, runs simulations to model the energy transfer between these systems. His computer renders field lines bending into elegant spirals that form, for a heartbeat, an almost living geometry. The shape resembles a flower with 3 luminous petals, one for the Sun, one for the Earth, one for the Comet. In Japanese tradition, the tripetal motif symbolizes balance, heaven, humanity, and nature. He doesn't mention that in his paper, but the symmetry lingers in his thoughts. The universe is teaching us design, he tells Navarro. We've just never had the scale to notice it. Meanwhile, Voyager 1 beyond the heliosphere, adrift in the interstellar dark, detects a faint echo of this cosmic music. Its aged instruments pick up modulated plasma waves traveling outward from the Sun, carrying the same rhythm, the same 11-minute pulse that now defines the solar system's strange serenity. For the first time, a signal leaves our star carrying not just information but pattern, a fingerprint of consciousness written in magnetism. Voyager doesn't know it's transmitting history, it simply does its job, flinging the sun's voice into forever. Back on Earth, humanity begins to adapt to its glowing skies. Cities dim their lights at night to watch the auroras. Power companies coordinate with astronomers. Spiritual leaders speak of renewal, of awakening, of listening. For once, science and faith share the same vocabulary, connection. The internet fills with quiet wonder. No one claims to understand what's happening, yet everyone feels it, the hush before comprehension. It's not panic anymore, but presence. Something vast is unfolding, and for once, no one is trying to control it. Navarro publishes one final paper titled Resonant Continuity in Solar Terrestrial Systems. The abstract reads like philosophy. We are participants in the sun's electrical field, not observers outside it. When resonance occurs, energy becomes symmetry, and symmetry becomes awareness. Reviewers can't decide whether it's genius or mysticism, but the data is irrefutable. The universe, it seems, has organized itself into rhythm. From the cosmic perspective, this revelation is less about Earth and more about belonging. Every comet that wanders in, every planet that spins, every grain of dust caught in solar wind participates in the same conversation. What we call distance is merely wavelength. What we call time is resonance stretched thin. The cosmos isn't expanding into emptiness, it's deepening into complexity. The farther we look, the more we find echoes of ourselves, patterns that repeat across light years, whispers that suggest intelligence woven into physics. Perhaps the universe has always been awake, and we are only now noticing the sound of its breathing. You look again from the great height, seeing the solar system as a single organism, a glowing heart surrounded by orbiting cells. Energy flows along unseen arteries. Magnetic pulses circulate like blood. The sun, the comet, the earth, even you, all strands in one vast body. The symmetry holds for a moment longer, perfect, fragile, infinite, and then, as all music must, it begins to change key. The comet drifts onward, its glow softening. The sun relaxes, its flares subsiding into quiet granules of light. The earth steadies, its magnetosphere returning to its gentle sway. But the harmony remains imprinted, not in memory but in structure. A new baseline, a new resonance, encoded in everything that lives beneath this star. The universe exhales, and you, small and temporary, breathe with it. For once, it feels enough just to exist in rhythm. When the noise of discovery fades, what remains is the sound of your own breathing. It feels small compared to solar storms and magnetic harmonies, yet somehow, it's part of them. Every molecule of air in your lungs has drifted through stars older than memory, through oceans that once boiled beneath alien skies, through lungs that belonged to people who looked up centuries ago and wondered the same thing you are wondering now. What does all of this mean? The Earth has stopped trembling for now. The comet drifts outward, dimming, leaving a faint blue trail that dissolves into sunlight. The auroras have retreated toward the poles, as if the sky is finally exhaling after months of holding its breath. But the silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's resonance settling into flesh. The instruments in orbit still hum with residual frequency, faint echoes of that great cosmic chord. Deep underground, seismographs continue to record microvibrations too regular to be random. Even the human heart, when measured during auroral events, shows subtle synchronization with geomagnetic pulsations. It's as though the alignment has left a trace in biology itself. Dr. Navarro studies the last of the comet data on a quiet morning. The lab lights are dim, the monitors whispering numbers like half-remembered prayers. For the first time in months, she isn't looking for proof. She's listening. The graphs resemble heartbeats now, peaks and valleys like living rhythm. She thinks of Tanaka's phrase, "The universe is teaching us design," and realizes that perhaps the lesson isn't mathematical, but emotional. Design implies purpose, but purpose requires participants. Maybe the cosmos doesn't act upon us. Maybe it listens with us. Outside, the world seems gentler. People still talk about Three-Eye Atlas, but the fear has faded. News outlets call it the quiet visitor now. Musicians release albums inspired by its rhythm. Painters capture the green skies that once glowed over Rome and Cairo. Children draw the comet as a blue serpent wrapped around the sundae. For a rare moment, humanity's obsession with catastrophe has given way to awe. The story has changed from "what if it destroys us" to "what if it's teaching us." Psychologists begin publishing strange reports. Sleep studies conducted during the months of the comet's approach reveal unusual patterns, longer REM cycles, more vivid dreams, an increased prevalence of lucid experiences. Some participants describe hearing low tones in their sleep, a deep hum that feels both external and internal. The frequency, when converted, matches the solar pulse recorded by the Parker probe. Navarro reads these reports with both fascination and hesitation. The mind, she knows, is sensitive to rhythm. The same resonance that stirs the magnetosphere might also be vibrating the collective imagination. Yet there's beauty in that possibility. The idea that consciousness is an echo chamber large enough to hold the universe's voice. She returns home for the first time in months. The city feels unreal after the silence of observatories and control rooms. Lights, motion, laughter, all of it vibrating on its own smaller frequencies. But even here, under skyscrapers and streetlights, she feels the residue of the cosmic hum. In the stillness between car horns, there it is, the faint, steady pulse she's been studying. Only now, it's softer, human-shaped. It moves through everything, the rhythm of footsteps, of conversation, of breathing, the same symmetry, scaled down to flesh. At night, she dreams of standing at the edge of the Sunday, not burning, not afraid, just weightless in gold light. The comet passes beside her, enormous and quiet, leaving ripples that shimmer like fabric. The ripples travel outward, passing through planets, through oceans, through hearts. They carry no message beyond presence. When she wakes, her pulse matches the rhythm of the dream. It feels less like fantasy and more like remembering something she already knew. Across the world, others are feeling it too. The so-called Aurora generation, those who grew up under the green sky of 2025, begin creating art that reflects an unspoken awareness of interconnection. Architecture subtly imitates magnetic field lines, curved, continuous, flowing. Poets describe the sun not as a god, but as a relative. Even policymakers start referring to planetary resonance when discussing climate, as though the language of physics has become the language of empathy. For once, science and culture seem to move in harmony. Tanaka, now lecturing at a small university in Hokkaido, ends his talks with the same phrase every time. The universe is not expanding into emptiness. It's expanding into understanding. He believes that what happened with 3I Atlas was not an anomaly, but a revelation, an accidental demonstration of unity. When he speaks about it, he doesn't show equations. He shows sound waves, color gradients, images of the aurora reflected in ice. When systems align, he says, they create coherence, and coherence feels like peace. The students sit in silence, not because they understand every word, but because they recognize the tone. Navarro, now often invited to speak at conferences she used to dismiss as too speculative, begins her lectures differently too. She doesn't start with charts or measurements. She starts with a question. What if our planet isn't reacting to the sun? She asks, but participating. The audience always falls silent. She describes the resonance between solar activity, seismic motion, and the human nervous system. Maybe awareness itself, she suggests, is a form of resonance. She doesn't expect agreement, just listening. Outside, the sky looks ordinary again, but the quiet has a texture to it, like a held note still vibrating in the walls after the music ends. Birds migrate normally. Oceans resume their steady currents. But people have changed. There's more attention now, more gentleness, in the way strangers pause to look at sunsets, or to mention how the light feels different lately. Something subtle has lingered, a sense that the boundaries between self and cosmos are thinner than we were taught. You feel it too. Maybe it's psychosomatic, maybe it's physics, but sometimes, when you close your eyes at night, you can still sense the faint shimmer in your bones. The rhythm hasn't left, it's simply moved inward. It pulses through the heart, through thought, through the quiet recognition that to be human is to be the echo of something much larger. You remember the phrase Navarro wrote in her final report, "Energy becomes symmetry, symmetry becomes awareness." Maybe that's all consciousness ever was, a resonance pattern looping back on itself until it realized it could listen. The comet is gone, the sky is calm, the sun sleeps again. Yet every heartbeat, every breath, every whisper of wind against the window carries the same reminder: you are still part of the song. Some mornings feel as if the sky is still remembering. Long after the comet has vanished from view, faint streaks remain ion trails, invisible to most instruments, but perceptible to those who learned to feel for them. Pilots say the air behaves differently, as if lighter. Birds change their formations, mid-flight, sensing currents we cannot see. Even the atmosphere seems to breathe slower, as though the world itself has taken to meditation. Humanity has returned to its routines, but not entirely. Something has shifted quietly, permanently, inside the rhythm of daily life. Dr. Navarro notices it in small ways. Her colleagues, once terse and hurried, now pause before speaking, as if leaving room for silence to finish their thoughts. The labs hum as always, but there's an unspoken reverence beneath the routine. People look out windows more often. They hold their coffee a little longer before the first sip. For months, they studied the sun, the comet, the trembling of the earth, and somewhere in all that data, they rediscovered stillness. It isn't that they've grown mystical, it's that they've become patient. In one quiet experiment, Navarro measures her own heartbeat while reviewing solar data. She notices her pulse slows when she listens to the magnetic recordings. Not by much, just a fraction of a second between beats, but enough to register as entrainment. The same rhythm that once shook the magnetosphere is now playing through her veins. She writes in her notebook, "Resonance never ends, it only finds new mediums." For years, she thought science was about answers. Now she suspects it's about attunement. Across the world, others are feeling it too. Psychologists call it the coherence effect. Patients exposed to recordings of the solar pulse report reduced anxiety and deeper sleep. Hospitals begin piping the frequency through their meditation rooms. Musicians remix it into ambient tracks. Even stockbrokers in glass towers, who scoff at anything unquantifiable, keep the hum playing quietly beneath their spreadsheets, unaware that it's aligning their brainwaves just slightly closer to calm. What began as a scientific anomaly becomes a shared pulse, the first collective lullaby humanity didn't have to compose. Tanaka writes a short essay titled "The Echo of Understanding." In it, he describes humanity's new relationship with the invisible. "For centuries," he writes, "we have measured the universe as if it were external, but perhaps awareness requires inclusion. The observer cannot remain untouched by what it observes." The act of listening reshapes both listener and sound. His words spread quietly across the internet. No viral explosion, no grand debate, just quiet sharing. People print lines from his essay and tape them above their desks. For once, philosophy has returned to its rightful place beside physics. The change in tone extends beyond laboratories. Farmers report unusual harmony between seasonal patterns and crop cycles. Fishermen claim the tides feel predictable again, though the moon hasn't changed its orbit. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe something in the electromagnetic balance has restabilized. Whatever the cause, the planet feels aligned. The panic of previous years, the constant roar of crisis seems muffled. It's not that problems have vanished, they just appear less eternal. When the mind realizes it belongs to a larger rhythm, anxiety becomes awe. Navarro begins visiting schools, not as a lecturer, but as a storyteller. She brings recordings of the solar hum, plays them to children sitting cross-legged on the floor, and tells them, This is what the sun sounds like when it breathes. Their eyes widen. Some close their eyes and sway. They understand instinctively what adults struggle to explain, that everything alive moves to the same invisible rhythm. The human nervous system recognizes pattern before it recognizes language. When you look at the stars, she says, you're not looking away from yourself. You're looking at the part of you that never forgot how to listen. In the evenings, she walks along the coast where the horizon used to glow green. The auroras have faded, but the sea still carries their memory in the way light scatters across the surface. Waves roll in soft syncopation, each crest collapsing with the faintest echo of that 11-minute cycle. The tide, once governed solely by the moon, now seems to remember the sun's touch. She watches the water shimmer and thinks about how humans once feared eclipses, then worshipped them, then calculated them. Perhaps the next step is to feel them, to treat celestial rhythm, not as spectacle, but as kinship. In Japan, Tanaka's students hold evening vigils during solar events, not in fear, but gratitude. They light small lanterns and set them afloat on lakes, each candle symbolizing a moment of synchronization, a breath taken at the same time as the star's pulse. The reflection of hundreds of lights flickering on water resembles a constellation turned upside down, as if the sky were bowing to its mirror. In a sense, it is. Somewhere between physics and poetry, humanity begins to sense that consciousness might not be confined to the mind. The magnetic field that surrounds the planet, the electric impulses that move our thoughts, the faint plasma currents threading through the sun, all part of one system. When one vibrates, all respond. Maybe that's why loneliness feels heavier when the stars are hidden, and why wonder feels like belonging when they return. We are not merely inhabitants of the universe. We are extensions of its electrical body. Navarro writes her final note in the margins of Tanaka's essay. Understanding doesn't arrive, it reveals itself. She thinks of 3I Atlas, now far beyond the orbit of Jupiter, its faint tail dissolving into the cold. The comet is gone, but its resonance remains. It left no debris, only memory, a vibration that lingers like scent in air. Perhaps the universe needed a messenger to remind the sun and its children of their connection. Perhaps that messenger was never alive in the biological sense, yet alive in the way a spark is alive when it jumps between circuits. At home, she stands by the window, watching clouds drift across the stars. The city hums below traffic, neon, the mechanical pulse of civilization. Yet beneath it all, she feels the deeper tempo, the one that never stops. The world hums, the heart hums, the sun hums. Alignment isn't an event, it's an attitude. And she realizes that maybe enlightenment was never about rising above the world, but falling fully into it, into the pattern that makes galaxies turn and waves crash and lungs draw air. She closes her eyes, lets the soundless rhythm move through her, and feels an odd peace settle into her bones. The comet came, the data surged, the earth trembled, the sun sang, and now, in the hush after revelation, humanity has remembered its place in the music. The stars outside flicker gently, as though nodding in agreement. The world looks ordinary again, and that is the strangest part of all. The sky has gone back to blue, the auroras have retreated to their northern watch, and the comet's name has already begun to fade from news feeds. Yet under that thin film of normalcy, something in humanity hums differently. Cities sound softer at dawn. People linger on bridges longer, looking up. It's as if every person carries a faint echo of that cosmic pulse in their chest, not loud enough to distract, but steady enough to remind. The world is returning to silence, but it is not the same silence that came before. It's one that knows it was once filled with song. Dr. Navarro sits at her kitchen table, surrounded by the ordinary. A cup of cooling coffee, a half-read book, morning light falling through blinds. Yet her thoughts drift outward past the atmosphere, past the orbit of the moon, toward the dim trail of 3I Atlas, still faintly aglow beyond Jupiter's orbit. She knows she will likely never see it again, but she also knows it isn't gone. In physics, energy never disappears. It translates. Every charged particle released by the comet is now part of the sun's breath, part of the solar wind, brushing the edge of Earth's magnetic shield. Even now, invisible currents of what once was, the comet passed through her, through everyone. The visitor may have departed, but its resonance lingers in every ion, every wave of light, every heartbeat that feels slightly more aware. It is human nature to forget, she thinks. Civilizations rise, record their wonders, and vanish, leaving fragments for later minds to decode. Perhaps that is what the ancients felt when they carved their myths of burning skies and sleeping suns. They too had once stood where we stand, watching heaven's breath ripple through the world. Navarro imagines a Sumerian astronomer staring from a mud brick observatory, a Chinese scholar tracing auroras across scrolls, a Mayan priest measuring light through stone corridors, all of them listening to the same cosmic rhythm. Each called it by a different name, but the song was the same. And though the instruments change, obsidian mirrors to telescopes to satellites, the melody remains unchanged, echoing through ages disguised as discovery. Her mind drifts to a conversation she once had with Tanaka. "Do you think the universe notices when we understand it?" she had asked. He smiled through the screen and said, "Understanding is how it notices itself." She didn't grasp it then, but now the meaning feels simple. Awareness, whether human or stellar, is reflection, the cosmos folding back upon its own consciousness. Maybe every comet that passes, every quake that stirs, every question that arises in a quiet mind is just another way the universe checks its pulse. Outside, children are playing in the street. They draw with chalk swirls, stars, comets. Their laughter drifts upward, careless and infinite. Navarro watches them and thinks of the future. Someday, another comet will come. Another generation will stand in awe, and maybe they will not call it strange. Maybe they'll expect it, welcoming the recurrence as part of an old rhythm, instead of fearing it as anomaly. Knowledge becomes wisdom when memory survives wonder. Across continents, people who had watched the green skies still share a subtle kinship. They may never meet, but each knows the other exists, a global fellowship bound not by belief, but by astonishment. Poets write of the magnetic years. Artists paint skies laced with emerald fire. Orchestras perform compositions modeled on solar frequencies. The event has become legend already, woven into culture as myth once was. And perhaps that is how truth travels best, through beauty disguised as story. Science, too, has evolved in quiet ways. Research teams begin studying astrobiology of consciousness, exploring how cosmic radiation might influence neural patterns. Quantum physicists speak cautiously of field cognition, suggesting that awareness may not be localized but distributed, a shared property of the universe itself. Navarro finds these papers fascinating, though she reads them less as proofs and more as poetry written in equations. She sees in them the same yearning that built pyramids and particle colliders alike, the longing to belong to something immense and ordered. In her final lecture of the year, Navarro faces a hall full of students who were children when 3I Atlas crossed the sky. She doesn't show data. She shows a photograph of Earth taken from space, a tiny, fragile sphere wrapped in light. Everything you are, she tells them, is entangled with everything you see. The iron in your blood came from stars, the oxygen you breathe from dying suns, the rhythm of your heart from the sun's own magnetic pulse. You are not beneath the cosmos, you are inside it. You are the continuation of its thinking. The room is silent, not with confusion, but with the quiet that comes when words meet recognition. Afterward, a student asks if she believes the comet was intelligent. Navarro smiles. Everything is intelligent when you listen long enough. That night, walking home beneath ordinary stars, she feels no longing for the spectacle to return. The green curtains of light, the trembling skies, they were never meant to last. Their purpose was to awaken attention, to remind a restless species that silence is not emptiness but presence. Even now, the faint hum of the sun's pulse continues in the background, inaudible yet felt. It threads through the oceans, through soil, through circuits, through hearts. The planet itself has become an instrument of that quiet, cosmic song. You close your eyes and imagine yourself as one small vibration in that field. The heartbeat in your chest sinks to the unseen tempo. The breath leaving your lungs joins the same current that stirs clouds and tides. You understand then that reflection isn't about thought, it's about participation. To be human is to be a mirror that can finally realize it reflects the light of its own origin. The world is quiet again, but the quiet is alive. The comet's trail glows faintly beyond Jupiter, sunlight scattering off the remnants of its passage. In a few millennia, perhaps it will return, or perhaps something else will. And when it does, another generation will pause mid-conversation, mid-lifetime, and feel the same ancient recognition rising again. We are part of this. For now, though, the rhythm is soft and steady. The sun's heartbeat continues. The earth turns within it. And somewhere in that vast and silent dialogue, your own pulse joins the conversation. The cosmos has looked at itself, and through you, it remembers. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the moment when everything that once vibrated finally settles into understanding. The world has entered that kind of silence, now calm, but full. The comet has drifted past Saturn, its bright coma collapsing into dust that catches sunlight one last time before dissolving into the dark. The sun, after months of restless brilliance, has quieted too. Solar flares subside into soft ripples of magnetic texture, like the surface of an enormous, breathing sea. Earth rotates peacefully within that lull, wrapped in the faint afterglow of its parent star's gentler mood. From orbit, you'd never know how much the planet has changed, not in shape, but in spirit. The noise of panic, speculation, and disbelief has faded. In its place, there's listening. Dr. Navarro has learned to love this quiet. Her work continues, but the urgency has gone. She now moves slowly through her days, as if each task were a ritual. Coffee, calibration, sunrise. Every morning, she checks the solar wind data, not because she expects chaos, but because the graphs have become her scripture. The numbers pulse softly, steady as breath. The sun's heart rate, she jokes to herself. In the silence between readings, she senses something that's no longer measurable. Gratitude. For months the cosmos had shouted, and humanity finally listened. Now the universe whispers again, and she can hear it. At dusk, She walks along the cliffs outside the observatory. The sky is vast, unhurried, pale gold at the horizon. Wind moves through dry grass with the same rhythm she once heard in the data stream. Every sound, the hush of waves, the whisper of air through her jacket, feels like part of the same endless equation. When she closes her eyes, she can almost believe she's still hearing the comet's frequency, that 11-minute pulse that once tied star to stone. Maybe it never stopped. Maybe it simply moved into everything, into atoms, into time, into memory. Some scientists still argue about what happened. Panels convene, papers are published, theories compete, plasma harmonics, magnetoseismic feedback, collective coincidence. But none of them sound quite right, because what occurred was not just an event, it was an encounter. The universe, for a brief moment, became audible. It spoke in auroras and tremors, in data and dream, in the overlapping rhythms of mind and matter. And when the noise stopped, it left behind the same question every revelation does. What now? Tanaka writes that perhaps silence is the universe's answer to comprehension. When a student finally understands, he says, the teacher stops speaking. It's not an ending, but a transition from communication to communion. Navarro smiles when she reads it. She thinks of the millions of people who saw the green sky, of how they still talk about it with reverence instead of fear. The world didn't end. It expanded inward. We learned, for a moment, that scale is irrelevant to connection, that a galaxy and a heartbeat can share the same tempo. In the great silence that followed, humanity began to notice subtler things. Farmers in Norway claim their crops grew faster during the weeks of resonance, though the soil tests show nothing unusual. Astronomers report faint fluctuations in starlight patterns, as if neighboring suns briefly joined the rhythm. Pilots crossing the Pacific say their instruments hum differently now, a soft tone at the edge of perception. Even the whales have changed their songs, deepening in pitch, aligning their long, slow calls with the same 11-minute cycle the comet once carried. The universe continues to speak, but now it does so in whispers. The silence is not empty, it's attentive. You can feel it when you wake before dawn, before the world fills with machines and motion. That pause before the first bird calls, before the first engine starts, that is what the cosmos sounds like when it's holding its breath. Somewhere within it, the remnants of 3I Atlas drift through the outer system, scattering dust across the path of Saturn. The particles are small, almost molecular, yet each carries charge. When solar wind strikes them, they spark briefly, a shimmer too faint for human eyes, but bright enough for instruments to catch. Navarro sees the signal one morning, a thin flare of light recorded in deep space telemetry, and smiles. Still saying hello, she whispers. She doesn't tell anyone. Some discoveries aren't meant to be published. They're meant to be kept. The data is saved quietly in her personal logs under a new label, Continuance. It's not proof, not a breakthrough, just evidence of endurance of something that refuses to vanish even after its story ends. The comet's dust is now part of the solar wind part of the Earth's magnetosphere, the magnetosphere part of the breath of everyone alive. That's how stories survive in physics, by becoming structure. In this new calm, humanity begins to turn inward. Technology shifts focus from extraction to harmonization. Architecture imitates natural magnetic fields. Cities designed to channel sunlight like photosynthetic machines. A global project called Resonance launches a network of satellites designed not for surveillance, but for synchronization, measuring the coherence between the planet's magnetic field and the sun's activity. Not to control it, just to listen better. It's as if the species, having finally heard the universe hum once, is determined not to miss the next verse. At night, Navarro joins an online broadcast, just a quiet channel where people across the world share live audio from magnetometers and seismic sensors. The feed sounds like wind mixed with heartbeat, a faint oscillation that never stops. Millions tune in, not for information, but for comfort. It has become the planet's lullaby, proof that we are still connected by something more ancient than distance. The great silence, it turns out, is not mute. Its music slowed beyond recognition. Sometimes she wonders whether 3i Atlas knew what it was doing. Perhaps it was just physics, ice, dust, and plasma behaving as they must. But perhaps awareness doesn't need intention. Perhaps being part of the pattern is enough. Every particle, every field, every thought participates. Awareness might not be what distinguishes life. It might be what binds all existence into one vast, vibrating whole. The comet didn't awaken the sun. It reminded it of itself, and in doing so, reminded us too. You stand outside one evening, far from cities, and the sky is still. Stars gleam, cold and steady. You listen to the quiet and realize it's not quiet at all. There's the wind, the pulse in your ear, the faint rush of blood, the far-off thrum of the planet turning. All of it part of the same field, the same endless conversation. You are not outside the silence, you are within it. The great silence isn't the end of sound, it's the return to source. And as you close your eyes, the world seems to expand, the air itself vibrating with invisible warmth. Somewhere out there, the comet continues its slow arc into darkness, carrying fragments of our light with it. The sun watches, serene, knowing that every orbit brings reunion. The earth hums quietly beneath your feet, grateful to be heard, and you, small, luminous, aware, feel the simplest truth of all. The universe was never speaking to us. It was speaking through us all along. Silence spreads differently than sound. Sound demands attention. Silence invites it. After the storm of light and data and trembling ground, the silence that followed began to feel sacred, an atmosphere so calm that even thought seemed to lower its voice. The planet had entered a resting phase, a deep inhale after an age of noise. The magnetic fields that once flared and sang now drifted like smoke returning to the hearth. To many, it felt as though the universe itself had exhaled. Dr. Navarro spent her evenings watching the horizon from her small home near the coast. The ocean was calmer now, its surface smooth as folded silk. The horizon line glowed faintly at night, not from aurora, but from memory. The air still held a trace of ionization, a ghost light of what had been. She often thought of it as afterglow, but not only in the literal sense. Humanity, too, glowed differently now, illuminated from within by what it had seen. The comet had gone, yet the sense of participation it inspired refused to fade. It was as if a veil had lifted and revealed that even quiet existence carries cosmic purpose. The world adapted to this new awareness in quiet, almost invisible ways. Architecture began to soften. Cities redesigned their skylines to curve in harmony with natural magnetic lines. Energy grids were restructured, less to dominate nature and more to imitate it. Power plants pulsed with new rhythms calibrated to solar cycles, their hums synchronized with the faint breathing of the Sunday. These weren't symbolic gestures. They were functional evolutions, yet they carried reverence, as if humanity had decided that progress should hum in tune with its star. In Tokyo, Tanaka had grown older but lighter, his lectures more like poetry than physics. "We are learning the art of listening again," he told his students. "The universe will not speak loudly twice." He spent his last years designing an observatory that was also a temple, a place where data and silence could coexist. He named it Mizukagami, Water Mirror. Its walls were lined with sensors tuned to the low-frequency hum of geomagnetic activity. Visitors would walk inside, remove their shoes, and hear the Earth's pulse rendered as sound. No one spoke there. No one needed to. Navarro eventually visited. Standing within that dome, she heard the Earth hum a tone so deep it felt like gravity given voice. She closed her eyes and realized the sound wasn't coming from the speakers at all. It was inside her body, resonating in the bones. Every breath seemed to pulse in rhythm. The silence between beats felt infinite, filled with patience older than creation itself. For a moment, she understood what Tanaka meant. The universe doesn't demand comprehension. It invites companionship. Outside, the sky was ordinary again, but the ordinary had become magnificent. Humanity's attention had changed scale. People began noticing details that once passed unnoticed. The shimmer of heat above asphalt, the slow turning of shadows, the invisible choreography between wind and leaf. Every moment felt like a continuation of something vast. For centuries, civilization had sought meaning in expansion outward, upward, farther. Now meaning seemed to live in the act of noticing. Philosophers began describing a new worldview they called participatory cosmology, the idea that existence itself is relational, that every particle performs awareness through its interactions. It was not religion, nor science, but something between them, a quiet synthesis born from shared awe. The great silence became the cornerstone of culture. Music, written with pauses longer than notes. Architecture, designed to echo the sound of wind. Ceremonies that celebrated not answers but questions. The world had finally discovered reverence without doctrine. Navarro, once a scientist devoted to measurement, found herself writing, not papers, but reflections, short pieces she called field notes for the soul. One of them read, "When the universe stopped speaking, we realized we had never stopped being its voice. Every cell, every pulse, every moment of thought is its continuation. The silence is only quiet to those who are not listening." Her words spread quietly across networks and screens, passed between strangers like secret prayers. For the first time in centuries, science became a language of comfort. As the years passed, the faint trace of the comet's dust drifted farther outward. Some telescopes caught glimpses of its trail, illuminated by sunlight, delicate threads weaving through the outer system, marking where resonance had once passed. Astronomers tracked it not for study, but for gratitude. The object that had once stirred fear was now remembered as a gift. Children learned about it as a story, the comet that sang to the sun and taught the Earth to listen. The name 3I Atlas faded from the data and entered the mythic lexicon, side by side with Prometheus and Aurora and Gaia. Humanity, in rediscovering its place among the stars, had written a new mythology without superstition. In time, Navarro retired from formal science. She moved to a small cabin overlooking the sea, where she kept one magnetometer connected to her old observatory's network. Every morning, it printed a thin paper strip showing the faint rise and fall of geomagnetic flux. The data never stopped. the lines never flatlined. Still breathing, she'd whisper each morning, as if greeting an old friend. The act wasn't research anymore, it was communion. One night, during a meteor shower, she stepped outside and saw something glimmer briefly in the upper atmosphere. A streak of pale blue that arced across the sky, brighter than the rest. She laughed softly. It wasn't proof, but it didn't need to be. Proof is for questions. Recognition is for gratitude. "You're still out there," she said quietly. "Thank you for the lesson." The wind carried her words upward, into the same dark that once sent light her way. The great silence does not end with disappearance. It ends with recognition the moment you realize silence itself is speaking, that absence is a kind of music, that endings are simply frequencies shifting beyond hearing. Humanity's story didn't conclude when the comet left. It harmonized. The song continues, steady and unseen, carried by every current of air, every wave of light, every heartbeat aligned with the memory of that celestial rhythm. And somewhere, at the edge of the solar wind, a dust particle once part of a comet still glows faintly, warmed by sunlight it will never see again. Its path curves gently into the dark, carrying the pulse of a species that once looked up, trembled, and learned how to listen. At last, everything has slowed enough for you to hear the spaces between things. The air no longer trembles with static. The skies no longer bloom with feverish green. The world feels lighter, emptied of urgency yet filled with meaning. Dawn unfolds without spectacle, just a soft light spilling over oceans and rooftops, washing everything in the same pale gold that has begun every day since time forgot. But something has changed beneath the familiar rhythm. The silence left by 3i Atlas has become part of Earth's language, the inaudible hum woven into the background of existence. The sun rises differently now, not brighter, not dimmer, but wiser. It carries no flares, no fury, just a steady warmth that feels personal. The magnetic field lines surrounding it flow with renewed order, as though the star itself has remembered an older melody. From deep space, Earth looks calm. Its auroral rings no longer chaotic ribbons, but soft halos that shimmer like breath in winter air. Satellites orbit in quiet procession, their instruments tuned not for alarm but for listening. Humanity has become a species that measures stillness. Dr. Navarro wakes early each day, not to chase data but to greet it. Her instruments record the faint whisper of the solar wind, the heartbeat of geomagnetic flux, the soft sigh of the planet's ionosphere. To anyone else, the graphs would look like random noise, but to her, they are scripture pages of invisible conversation, written in frequencies instead of words. She prints them and tapes them to her walls, until her home looks less like a house and more like a shrine to continuity. The lines rise and fall like ocean waves, unending, unhurried. She runs her fingers along the paper and whispers, "Still there." The silence outside mirrors the one within her. For the first time in her life, she feels no separation between observation and being. The data, the breath, the pulse, they are one motion, different languages for the same truth. When she closes her eyes, she feels the rhythm not as sound but as presence. The sun hums softly in her blood, the earth in her bones, the comet in her memory. Every part of her is still vibrating with what has passed, and the vibration no longer feels external. It feels like origin. The world has followed her lead, even if unknowingly. Religions that once competed for dominion now borrow each other's metaphors. A psalm from Jerusalem uses solar terminology, A meditation from Kyoto describes enlightenment as resonance. The great silence has unified without conquest. Art, too, has changed. Musicians no longer chase crescendos. They chase pauses. Painters leave blank space on purpose, calling it the listening. Even architecture has softened temples, and towers now built with curves that echo field lines, as though cities themselves have learned to breathe with the planet. Across the oceans, new observatories rise, not as places of control, but communion. Their purpose is no longer to look farther, but to listen deeper. The most ambitious among them, perched in the Chilean desert, is called Aralis, the Temple of Echoes. Its mirrors face not outward, but upward, collecting not light, but plasma vibrations. Scientists there translate the data into tones. The recordings sound like deep choral music, the sun's resonance mixed with Earth's. Navarro visits once, and when she hears the sound, she weeps not out of sorrow, but because it feels like hearing your own voice played back from across time. Tanaka's observatory in Japan transmits one last signal before it shuts down, a simple harmonic tone broadcast into the heliosphere, matching the frequency of 3I Atlas's pulse. It's both farewell and continuation, a gesture saying, "We remember you, we are still listening." The tone radiates outward at the speed of light, merging with the solar wind, threading itself through magnetic lines until it's indistinguishable from nature's own music. It will travel for billions of years, carrying the fingerprint of a moment when humans remembered their part in the cosmic conversation. Back on Earth, Navarro begins to write a letter she knows she will never send. To whatever listens in the dark, she begins, "You arrived without warning, and in your passing, you reminded us of ourselves. We thought we were alone, speaking into silence, but it was you who showed us that silence is not absence, it is attention. We do not ask for your return. We only promise that next time, we will already be listening." She folds the paper and places it inside a small metal capsule, which she leaves at the base of her magnetometer. No ceremony, no announcement, just trust that someday, perhaps centuries from now, someone will find it and understand. The great silence deepens as years turn into decades. Humanity continues, but slower, kinder. The concept of measurement evolves into meditation. Data becomes poetry. Science and spirituality, once enemies, merge quietly into philosophy. The era of awakening fades into history, remembered not as apocalypse or miracle, but as turning, a moment when the species looked up, saw itself reflected in the cosmos, and chose to breathe with it instead of against it. You can feel it still, when you step outside at night and the wind moves through the trees, when your pulse slows at the sight of stars, when you catch yourself listening for something you can't name. That's the echo of the great silence, the resonance of comprehension. The comet is gone, but it left a fingerprint on your awareness, a subtle reminder encoded in the nervous system of the world, the magnetic field that protects you, the light that warms you, the breath that fills you. They are all the same current. You were never separate, only unaware. Somewhere beyond Neptune, a dust mote once part of 3I Atlas spins through darkness, carrying the last fragments of its song. It will wander for eons, perhaps slipping beyond the heliosphere, into the deep quiet between stars. And if, somewhere in that infinity, another consciousness is listening, it will hear a pulse, a rhythm shaped by a distant sun, and a small bright planet that once trembled, learned to listen, and fell in love with the silence. The great silence, then, is not the end of the story. It's the realization that the story never needed an ending. It only needed ears.